Welcome to Jared Scott Outdoors, your source in the field for local outdoor news. This week on Jared Scott Outdoors, we're out moose hunting, and it's my wife that has the tag. Now this is actually her first big game hunt, and actually her first hunt she's ever been on. She hasn't even hunted rabbits before. She's been putting in for moose for quite some time, and finally drew the tag. So we're kind of excited about it. It's a river bottoms hunt. As you can see, it's actually, there's some snow on the ground, so we've drawn this hunt out for quite a while now. So anyways, I'm really excited just to have Candice hunting, excited to see what happens. What do you think about it?
We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. So who knows? I'm crossing my fingers. This is the start of many more hunts to come, but either way, let's get after it. For those lucky enough to draw a once-in-a-lifetime moose tag, you know that the moose hunt is actually a very long season, nearly 3 months. It opened August 30th and goes until the 23rd of November. We didn't get out a lot in the early season just because I was too busy with my kids hunting archery elk and general deer. I wasn't too worried, however, as later in the season the leaves would fall and make finding moose that much easier. At least that's what I assumed from past experiences when I had my moose tag 7 years ago. The difference, however, was that my hunt was in the mountains while Candice's hunt was on the river. On one of our early trips out, we quickly found that on the river, when the leaves were still up, it's tough to see much at all. However, on one trip, we did find this cow and calf in some thick cover. I think they had just as much of a hard time seeing us as we did finding them. We watched for a while to make sure there weren't any other moose hidden in the thick brush, and then continued on. To give you an idea of how thick it was, this grass was as tall as us. As we tromped around, I realized that we needed a lot of luck to find moose this early in the season. The next moose we heard before we saw. It was either spooked or just on the move, but it came noisily through the brush and passed us by. Sneaking on in, we could tell that it was indeed a bull, the first one of the season for us. But even though it was close, it stayed in thick cover enough that we really couldn't see it that clearly. It got our hopes up, but as we slowly snuck in for a better look, it was quickly evident that it wasn't a very big one. It eventually got tired of our presence and trotted on off. Well, as I mentioned, we gave the hunt some time to let the leaves drop while I focused on other hunts. So as October rolled around, we were back out looking for moose. This time we'd gained access to some river through some private property, which on these river hunts can be very crucial. Working through the brush, we did find a young cow moose. Again, we snuck on in and verified that there weren't any other moose in the area, but really on this trip we learned there was still a lot of whitetail hunters out and about hunting with the any weapons short range season. We figured this would keep a lot of the moose hiding in the thicker cover, and so with this in mind, we decided it was time to hit the river via boat to access some other areas that may not have as much hunting pressure. My friend Brett was willing to take us out a few times as he has a jet boat that can move up and down the river easily, even with the lower water conditions. It actually took several trips before we found any moose at all, but when we did, we saw antlers. By the time I got the camera out and rolling, a second bull stood up next to the first.
I think he might be bigger than we think.
While Candice thought they might have been bigger than we thought, I could tell both the bulls were just small ones. However, they were moose, and we hadn't seen too many of them, so we went ahead and cruised on over for a closer look.
Oh, there's a third one now. That's the better one too. They're bacheloring up.
During the end of September and 1st of October, the bulls were rutting, but now it appeared that the rut was over as the bulls were now able to tolerate each other again and started to group up as they often do for the wintertime. Even though this third bull looked a little better than the others, it was in reality another small bull with only an apparent 3 points on each side. Now when I say small, that is of course relative to the situation. Any bull moose is a big animal, and they look even bigger when you're in close range. I've also noticed that they look bigger head on and especially going away. It's when they turn their heads broadside to you that you can really tell how big a bull is. In this case, even though they were all big critters that would have filled our freezer with a lot of meat, we were after a bigger, more mature bull. You have to remember that this is a once-in-a-lifetime tag, and Candice wasn't ready to fill it with just a young bull. As you can see, not only were there 3 bulls, but also a cow that stood up, having been bedded down and out of sight at first. It looked like these young bulls were still trying to catch a scent of some of the pheromones from the cow. Even though there wasn't a shooter in the bunch, we still enjoyed watching the moose and having that bit of hope sparked even for an instant. Not only did we see moose, but lots of other river life, like this pair of bald eagles and even this porcupine that was hanging out up in a tree, as porcupines often do. We boated right under it while it kept a close eye on us. As the season progressed and the first snowstorms fell here in Idaho, we realized that the snow was what we needed to help give us an edge on finding some moose. With snow on the ground, we could just cover ground until we cut tracks and then use the tracks to find the moose. With this in mind, I went out on my own while Candice got the kids off to school and such. Trying a new area, it didn't take too long to cut some tracks in the fresh snow. I followed the tracks for quite a while as the moose moved around, fed, and even found some places where they'd been bedded down. Eventually, I was jolted out of my focus on the tracks as a moose jumped up right in front of me. It heard me coming as I was having to go through some noisy brush. It didn't know where I was or what I was, and so it just stood up, watching for some time. As you can see, it's hard to see it, even though it was under 20 yards away. Eventually, it lost interest in me and meandered over to a little better area for taping. As you can see, just another young bull. There was also a cow and a calf that were in the brush, but they were so camera shy that I didn't get any footage of them. I watched the bull for a while, making sure nothing else was nearby, and then slipped on out to go cut some other tracks. I hiked under another pair of bald eagles that were sure keeping a close eye on me, and then after several miles of hiking, finally cut another pair of moose tracks. They took me on a wild goose chase before finally finding them, but it just turned out to be a cow and calf. Then it was a long walk back out. A few days later, there was another storm that dumped another couple inches of snow, and so once again it was time to put boots on the ground. We've been checking out lots of locations while there was still some snow on the ground from the latest storm, but it had been melting off. So with the fresh snowfall, we were determined to find some bulls. Candice had to get a few things with the kids taken care of first, so I headed out with her planning on joining me in the afternoon. Once again, I cut some tracks in the snow and started following them through the brush. It worked out well again, and when I got close, a bull jumped up in front of me, having heard me first. As before, this bull just stood there for a while and then bedded back down. When I finally got my camera out, it was bedded down in so much brush that I couldn't see it at all. It was only about 30 yards away, but completely out of sight. What you couldn't see because I didn't have my camera ready was that this was the biggest bull I'd found so far. It had lots of points and was a definite possible shooter. I needed to get a better look at it. I snuck in another 10 yards and still couldn't find it. However, another moose caught my eye about 40 yards to the right. It had seen me trying to sneak in and was intently watching me. I stayed motionless for a while and watched as there were actually several moose in the area. I had seen at least a couple more young bulls and 2 cows. However, it was the big one bedded down right in front of me that I was trying to find. Eventually, after standing on a log, I found its antlers in the brush. Look closely and you can see a lot of points aiming skyward. I knew I needed to get a better look at it without totally spooking it off, so I purposely broke a few branches to get it to stand up. It worked well, but as it got up, it headed off towards the other moose. Watching it, I verified that it was indeed the best bull I'd seen this season. It looked like it had 9 or 10 solid points per side and just looked like a good bull. I watched for a while longer while it joined the other moose. I now counted 4 other bulls with the 2 cows as well as the bigger bull. With all the footage in hand, I snuck out the way I'd come.
Well, as you can see, I've got my wife now. We went home and I showed her the footage of that moose, and you know, it really piqued her interest. So we're out here, and you know, we weren't quite sure, or she wasn't, I guess, if she wanted to take it or not. Most likely, but we figured let's just go get a look at it, and then you can just decide for yourself whether it's one you want or not. So we're here. We've got about a half mile to sneak in, see if we can find them again, and see what happens.
To make sure we didn't bump them inadvertently, we followed my tracks back in. It was a longer route, but we wanted to be as careful as we could. Both Candice and I were getting excited at the prospects of finally filling her tag and putting an end to what had proved to be a long hunt. Once close to where I'd left the bulls, Candice chambered a slug. On the river, this is a short-range weapon area, so a shotgun would be her weapon of choice. Ever so slowly, we snuck into where I'd last seen the moose. Candice was the first to spot one of them staring our way. It was one of the cows. As before, however, we just held still for a while and the cow relaxed and went back to feeding. Eventually, a few other moose came into sight feeding in the thick brush. Antlers appeared and it looked like it could be the big one. As it cleared the brush a little more, we could tell it wasn't the one we were looking for. So far, we'd seen 2 cows and 2 of the younger bulls, but the big one was still not in sight. We knew it'd be here close, it was just a waiting game until it appeared. 15 minutes later, we still hadn't seen it.
So we were trying to sneak in as they were feeding and get a little closer, thinking that maybe the big one was either bedded down in between us and them or had maybe gone a little bit ahead of them. We were quite sure what we were going to do. About ready to turn around and cut him off around and head in front of him again. And then we see some hunters coming our way, and we thought, well, that will work pretty good. If he's there, they'll bump him, and we'll know one way or the other. But then...
All right, well, you didn't see the shot happen, and here's the bull, and I'll tell you what. There's a reason you didn't see that happen, and that's because Marcella here harvested the bull with her bow. This is Marcella and Travis Butler, and they were also in here this morning and found these as well, came back in, and Marcella with an arrow went ahead and arrowed this bull. So as you can see, just a beautiful bull. Congratulations, Marcella, on filling this tag. Once in a lifetime tag here, and anyways, it's a really pretty bull, so congratulations. You guys have a lot of work. We came out expecting some work, and we're gonna leave you guys to it on this one. But anyways, congratulations, nice bull. We'll head out and see if we can't pick something else up for the rest of this week here. But anyways, the hunt continues for us, and for Marcella, it's ended.
All right, well, not happening today. As you saw, Marcella took the bull that Jared had come out and thought might be a good one for me to take. He came home, downloaded the footage, we kind of watched it over and over again, waited for homemade bread to come out of the oven. Probably shouldn't have done that. They shot it 20 minutes before we got there. But if there's a silver lining on this cloud, there was another girl who took it with her bow, so that's okay.
After that close call, I was only more determined that we would find a good bull for Candice. I spent more time on this hunt than any other hunt I've done, just covering ground and pounding out the miles. There had to be a decent moose somewhere in the unit. However, by the time the last couple days rolled around, I felt like I nearly walked the entire river. Of course, covering that much ground, I had found several other bulls. This one, for example, got me excited at first, but again, with a better look, I realized it wasn't big enough. There were 3 other very young bulls with it that made it look like a big one, but in reality, it was just a young one as well. Now this was an interesting bull. As you can see, it only has 1 antler. It looks like it had already shed off one side. However, this is still more than a month before I think moose start to shed off their antlers. Maybe it broke off, I really don't know. Either way, it was an interesting bull to watch just 20 yards from me. Eventually I started to cover the same areas twice, 3 times, and even more. This is the same group of bulls that was with the bigger one that Marcella harvested a week earlier. I watched them for a while and then slipped on out. Back in another place I'd hunted before, I got a quick glimpse of a spooked bull that took off through the brush. It looked like a possible shooter. I called Candice and told her to load up and get coming my way. However, when I snuck around and got a better look at it, I found it wasn't what my first impression led me to believe. From the back it looked great, but it was all tines and no mass. In fact, it only had 5 points on each side.
You know, really, I feel like we're just chasing ghosts right now, talking with other hunters. Sounds like most of the bigger bulls were already taken, so we're out chasing rumors of maybe there was a big one here and maybe over there. I don't know. Either way, we got one day. We're gonna just pound it as much as we can, cut as many tracks as we can, and follow them down and see what happens.
Candice and I hiked all day, covering lots of miles and following as many sets of moose tracks as we could. We did find another young bull with a cow that disappeared pretty quickly, and actually got kind of excited when we found a bunch of tracks that we could tell were several moose that had just crossed through an area we had been through recently, so we knew they were fresh. Our hopes were high for a quick moment, but after following for about a mile, once again we found it was just a group of young bulls with a few cows.
Well, we've got an hour left of the last day of the hunt, so it looks like we're going to wrap it up and we're going to eat this tag. Candice has not been happy about that, the idea of eating a tag, but she said let's just get the meat and be done with it. But for me, where it's once in a lifetime, I'm like, no, let's wait, because we're going to shoot a few more elk this year, hopefully on muzzleloader. We'll fill the freezer with meat one way or another, and we'll save this once in a lifetime tag for, you know, another year, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road. Who knows? We'll see. Anyways, make sure.
Tune in next week at the same time for another episode of Jared Scott Outdoors.